Okay guys, welcome back to the Northeast Updates YouTube channel, and we're going to be looking in today's video at the Newcastle United squad. Buy, keep or loan every single one of the players. I'm going to give you my thoughts. Now Newcastle, very unfortunately, the last game of the season in the final, lost out on any sort of European football thanks to Manchester United pulling off a miracle against Manchester City. Puts a twist on it for Newcastle fans, because before that we had thought that European Conference League was almost a given. We thought Man City would absolutely spank Manchester United. That wasn't the case, and some of the young players who maybe we would have looked at keeping on board with us, testing them in Europe, keeping around the squad, now it might be that we loan some of them out. We're going to do a full deep dive here. Let us know your thoughts and comments below. This is going to be the first part and a second part video. We're going to look at the full Newcastle squad, look at who we sell, and then we're also going to look in the second video at who we would fetch in, who are the transfer targets that Newcastle should be going at. So without any further ado, we're going to be looking at the Newcastle squad. I'm going to put a graphic on screen now so you'll be able to see the full squad. We've broken it up so you can see every single player and the players who are known for playing in that position. Obviously Newcastle, very versatile players. A lot of the players can play in a multitude of positions, especially in defence as well and on the wing. So first of all, goalkeepers. Now number one is Nick Pope. He's been out a lot of this season with a shoulder injury. He's coming back into the team. He's 32 years of age now. Already the transfer window isn't even open, but we've seen Newcastle be linked with a lot of goalkeeper options already, including the likes of Ramsdale. Now, will some of them keepers come in and expect to be number one ahead of Nick Pope or number two to Nick Pope? It all depends on who we'll look to sign. But for me, Nick Pope's a definite keep, even if it is a competition where we've got two really good goalkeepers who are kind of trying to outperform each other. That just works even better for Newcastle. That being said, Martin Dubravka. Now, he's had a lot of minutes this season because of the Nick Pope injury. He's come in. Mixed bag is probably the easiest way to describe it. He's not really been horrendous to the eye test. However, he has conceded a lot of goals. That's mainly because Newcastle's been in the middle of an injury crisis. We've had a lot of pressure put on the defence, a lot of shots at goal where we wouldn't normally have that problem. He's come in, he's probably been about a 6 to 7 stars out of 10, but he's 35 years old. Now, is he going to be happy going back from playing first team football to being second fiddle at this time in his career? It's probably the last payday that he's going to get. He's 35, probably as a goalkeeper, he's got 1 or 2 more years in him. I would see him being knocking on the door for Eddie Howe, wanting to try to get a transfer away. If he does, fair enough. He's been a fantastic servant at Newcastle. He has been here for a lot of seasons. It is probably a fair time to look at it and let him go. Maybe you get a younger person competing with that position, competing with Nick Pope. So for the purposes of this, I've got him down as a sell. Now the next one is Loris Karius. Now he's only had 90 minutes of football this entire season for Newcastle. Now considering there's been an injury crisis, especially with Nick Pope, it seems he's no longer wanted. He's kind of really far down the pecking order. His contract is up this summer. You can imagine he's not going to want to stick around too much longer. He's probably going to be having bids in because he's a free. He's going to be attracting some decent wage, and it's probably right for the club and for the player to move him on. And then we've got Mark Gillespie. Now you can see exactly what playing for Newcastle means to him. If you've seen the Australian tour, you'll have known that he was in net. It was a penalty shootout. He saved what was the winning penalty. You've seen exactly how much it meant to him. You've seen Dan Burn coming from the bench, go all the way, give him a giant cuddle. Just shows you what an influence he has on the team. Eddie Howe even came out after the game, spoke very highly of him. He's probably a good one to keep around. You do need a multitude of keepers, and he's fantastic to have around. If Karius and Dubravka go though, Newcastle are going to have to look at whether it's 1 or 2 goalkeepers that we're going to need for backup. You would imagine there'll be one strong contender and one promising youngster that can kind of fill in and be an understudy to Nick Pope. Nick Pope is in the twilight of his career. He's probably only going to be doing it for a few more years. So having that young protege is just about right for a couple of seasons where he'll come in and become Newcastle's number 1. Right, let's go into the first one. Straight away, we'll choose a right back because Kieran Trippier is one that pretty much divides opinion. Now, you'll probably know me. I'm outside St James's Park almost every single home game speaking to Newcastle fans. Kieran Trippier this season has been someone that's split a lot of fans. Very Marmite. Now, just looking at the facts here, he's 33. He's played 26 games this season. He's got 10 assists and 1 goal. He is on a lot of set plays. He's actually level with Anthony Gordon with assists. He's made a lot of mistakes this season. It was rumoured there was a lot of off-the-field incidents that probably led to that, but even when he's come back towards the back end of the season, the mistakes have kind of still been in the game a little bit. It does worry me personally. He does split a lot of opinion, Kieran Trippier, this season. I think it's because of the mistakes, plus he's 33, so you would just imagine you can't go on and play forever. he will start declining sooner or later. Now, is it just a lack of form this season, or is it that he's on the decline? That's up for you guys to decide. Let us know what your thoughts are below, but I would imagine this one's going to be very Marmite out of all of the selections so far. Now, just looking at the facts, like I say, he is 33, but he's played 26 games this season. He's got 10 assists. That's the same as Anthony Gordon, the most assists that Newcastle have had all season. I personally, just from the eye test, don't think he delivers as much as he could from corners and free kicks. I remember when we signed him, and I was so glad that we had a set piece specialist in our ranks. For all the free kicks he takes and all the corners, I would personally expect more from someone of his quality. Now, that's probably a knock, but it's also an acknowledgement for just how good Kieran Trippier is on free kicks. We've seen it over the last 5-10 years. Fantastic, one of the best in the world at it. I personally don't think we've seen the best of him at Newcastle on set plays. Let us know, like I say, your comments below. For me though, I'm going to have to say keep. I'll move on quickly. I can't sit on the fence for any of these selections. I'm going to have to give my personal opinion. For this, I would keep Trippier. I think he's a fantastic influence to have around. He's a fantastic leader on and off the pitch. And for me, the person who'll be coming in as #1 right back next season, Livramento, I think they'll bounce off each other. I think you'll be learning a hell of a lot from Kieran Trippier this season. I would keep him around purely for that, the development that he could do. Plus, I would also try to keep him around because of the coaching benefits that hopefully he'll have long-term for Newcastle. He's got a fantastic relationship with Eddie Howe. I would expect him to be here well after his career, joining the coaching staff, bringing a lot to Newcastle. You can see how passionate he is for the club, how well he works with Eddie Howe. And don't forget, he was the first one that jumped. We were in the mud, we were in relegation zone. Very dangerous for Newcastle. We attracted a Champions League player, Kieran Trippier. He's come to us. We've got to repay a little bit of faith somehow, even if normally I'm a bit ruthless with this. He deserves to go out on his own sword. He's been fantastic, and long may it continue into next season. Okay, so up next, we've got Tino Livramento. Now, this lad is 21 years old. Every single time he puts on a Newcastle shirt, which, to be fair, hasn't been an awful lot this season. You can tell he's not really super fit this season. He seems to be struggling a lot with injuries, like a lot of the Newcastle squad. But for me, every single time he's put a shirt on, he's been fantastic. He's picked up a number of man-of-the-match performances. He's been absolutely fantastic. And I would actually put him ahead of Kieran Trippier going into the next season, with a look at the future, seeing him as probably our #1 right back going forward. Now, like I say, Kieran Trippier will be helping him a lot behind the scenes. You can imagine with the crossing, he'll improve with him. His general play, his defensive, his attack, everything, his all-round game should improve because of the benefits of having Kieran Trippier around him. So for me, definite keep for this one. Then we've got Emil Kraft. Now, I've put him as a right back, even though this season he's been predominantly as centre back, as cover purely because of the injuries that we had. Now, if you'd asked me a few months ago, what's your thoughts on him, I would have said he's one of these disposable players that Newcastle could definitely afford to upgrade with the evolution of the club. However, he's stepped in, he's done a fantastic job. Other than the first game that he came in for, he hasn't really done anything wrong. So you need these kind of players. It's not all about the starting 11. You do need these players who are happy to sit on the bench and call in when needed. Now, when I'm doing this video, I'm doing it on the basis that Newcastle have probably got a transfer budget of around 40 to 60 million. So nothing too crazy. So this isn't going to be a massive overhaul of the Newcastle United squad. We're going to have to be a little bit shrewd, plus whatever we get from selling players as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to total up the value of all the players that I'll sell throughout the video, add it onto that, and in the second video, that's what transfer budget for how much Newcastle are going to have this summer, and decide who the players we're going for. So just mentioning that and putting that to the side, I would still have him as a sell. I do think, even though he has come in being impressive, I think Newcastle should be aiming a little bit higher. He's been a fantastic servant, being great. Versatility is absolutely fantastic. If Kieran Trippier and Livramento pick up an injury this season, obviously we're very, very exposed at right back. But if we're going to be looking at competing with the top 4 or top 6 this season, Emil Kraft is not one of them players. And for that reason, I would put him down as a sell. Okay, now moving on to the other side, left back. Now, first one I'm going through here is Dan Burns. Now, obviously, he's another one who hasn't been playing left back this season, the last few games of the season anyway. He's been moved more into a centre back. Now, that's because of injuries. Who knows what's going to happen when the start of the season happens. For me, and I think a lot of fans, and speak for a lot of fans, speaking to them after the games, he's not the best left back that's ever been at Newcastle. He's a very, very solid centre back though. You look at him and you just assume he's going to be a centre back. He does seem a little bit Bambi on ice sometimes, a little bit when he's left back. I don't think he offers a hell of a lot going forward. He's very solid defensively. He hasn't really got the pace that's needed. But for me, definitely keep him around. That versatility is going to come in very handy as left back if it's needed, but especially with the Sven Botman injury, that centre back position is very, very vulnerable, and I'll touch on that in a little bit. Just the lack of options that Newcastle do have at centre back. So Definitely worth keeping around, definitely keep, but I would definitely be playing him next season as centre-back. Now we've got Lewis Hall. Now, if rumours are to be believed, he's already signed for us because of the obligation from playing so many games due to the injury. You could tell at the start of the season, Eddie Howe wasn't necessarily convinced on him. He wasn't playing him in a hell of a lot of games. But as time's gone on and as the injury crisis has gotten worse, he's getting into the team and he's taken that chance very, very well. Only 19. If it's true that we have signed him, he's a definite keep. You wouldn't sign him and then loan him out or anything like that. Been very impressive the last few games of the season. I think he will start a lot of Newcastle games next season as our number one left back, but it does still concern me seeing him in his general play. If you think of who the right wingers are in the Premier League, you're going to have Salah next season, you're going to have Saka next season, you're going to have all of these very pacey, well-experienced professionals who've been doing it season in, season out. If Lewis Hall lines up against them, I wouldn't be too confident going into that. For me, I do think that we need to fetch in a number one left back and then have Lewis Hall as cover. Then obviously we've got Dan Burns who can step in for defence or left back cover if needed. Fantastic player, ton of potential. I don't think at 19 we need to be putting the world on his shoulders and expecting him to play every single game next season against world-class opposition. So definite keep, but I just thought that was worth mentioning as well. Okay, then we're on to Target. Now, he left Aston Villa to come and join us because he wasn't happy being number 2 on the bench. Deja vu, exactly the same things happened again at Newcastle. He's fallen further and further down the pecking order. And with Lewis Hall, he's further down even more so. Now, for me, like I say, I don't think he's going to want to sit on the bench for another season. Probably going to be unhappy. He's going to be wanting to play regular football at this stage in his career. Newcastle aren't going to be able to offer that. I don't think he's good enough to be able to take that role anyway and develop Newcastle. So for me, definite sell. Getting in the region, I would anticipate probably around 7.5 million I'll put down that we'll get for him. Let us know your thoughts and comments below on that one. Then we've got Matt Ritchie now, 34. His contract is expiring this season, so technically this will go down as a sell, but really it's just letting his contract run out. He's had a wonderful career at Newcastle. I still remember years and years ago being on Greece lads holiday, putting the telly on, watching Bournemouth, seeing a very young Matt Ritchie play, and literally man of the match, stole all my attention. Thought he's absolutely fantastic. Over the moon when Newcastle signed him, he's played fantastic, been a great servant for Newcastle. But time does catch up with absolutely everyone. He's 34. If we'd have gotten European Conference football, this would have been maybe a different answer. I would have probably extended his contract. It would have been great to have around the young players coming through, a bit of experience on the pitch. But since we didn't clinch that, it's going to have to be a sell or just let him run his contract out. I don't really see the value that he'd be fetching Newcastle with a player's wage. If he's happy to be the coaching staff, I think at his age, it'd be fantastic to step in. You can see the passion, everything he brings every single time he puts on a Newcastle shirt. I personally don't think he's going to be happy doing that. You can see that he still wants to play. I can see him this season dropping down to the Championship, and fair play to him. Fantastic. All the best, Matt Ritchie. Okay, now, central defence. Now, it was only when I've actually put this together, the graphic below, how exposed Newcastle are in the event of any injury. We've got 2 star players with Botman and Shaw. Other than that, I personally don't think Newcastle's got a hell of a lot of quality in central defence there. And I'll run through it in a little bit more detail, but this to me is a very, very important area that Newcastle need to strengthen this summer. Okay, so very first, Fabian Shaw. 32 years old, been a fantastic, solid in the heart of defence. He loves a long-range effort, chips in with occasional goals. Fantastic. Now, I remember an interview that he did during the Steve Bruce era, and he said, very rare for a footballer to admit my confidence is really low. You've seen it, he's a player transformed. He looks like a world-class player, so composed. He's got so much to his game. He's probably got another season or 2 in him at this top level, but for me, absolute no-brainer. He's got to be there next season, and he'll probably be the number 1 partnership once Sven Botman is fit again. They've worked up a fantastic partnership at Newcastle, and long may that continue. Then we've got Botman. I'm not going to do a massive thing on this. This is the biggest no-brainer of almost anyone in this. He's 24. You can see he come back this season. He was playing a little bit through injury, so he wasn't his regular self, but he's an absolute juggernaut as a defender. He's personally one of my favourite players for Newcastle. I think he's an absolute amazing player. Considering he's only 24, he's going to have a long career at Newcastle. If we can keep a hold of him, if he wants to stay here long term, the future's bright as long as we've got him as the central defender. The only problem that we've got is he has picked up a massive injury. He is going to miss a big chunk of next season. So Newcastle really do now need to look at transfers, not necessarily as a replacement for Sven Botman, but we're going to need someone to stand in so we've got a really good secondary option so they can start in, and then knowing as soon as Sven Botman comes, they're probably likely to go on the bench. So we really want to be, in my opinion, we want to be having about 3 really solid centre-backs and having that a couple of different options as well, but we definitely need them 3 top level centre-backs in order to compete, especially how Newcastle like to pick up injuries. We've seen that this season as well. So for me, definite keep. It's pointless going on about him. Fantastic player. Can't say enough about him. Okay, then we've got Jamal Lascelles. Now, we did a video just a couple of weeks ago before the end of the season. We looked at all of the players whose contract are up at the end of next season. Lascelles is one of them. It split a lot of fans' opinion. If you want to watch the video, I'll put a link below for that. But he's had more game time this season than even he would probably have expected. Now, since he's come in, he's been fantastic. I think he's overachieved. I think he's done fantastic against every single opposition that he's come up against. He hasn't been bullied off anyone. He hasn't really been outpaced. He's done nothing really wrong. But at 30 years old, the way that Newcastle are going, this is going to be a one that probably Newcastle fans will sit on the bench with, and some will go for keep and some will go for sell. For the purposes of this video, I can't sit on the fence, like I say. I would put him down as a sell. Now, knowing Eddie Howe like we do, like Newcastle fans have seen in the last few years, he is very, very loyal to his players. I can imagine he'll be a definite keep in the eyes of Eddie Howe, especially this season when there's no European football, Champions League football. But for me, it's something, again, that should be upgraded with the evolution of Newcastle. If you took away the Newcastle badge, what kind of team would you put Jamal Lascelles in? He's probably a team that's maybe 13th, 14th in the league. He's not going to be a number one defender for someone that's competing for Champions League or European football. For me, this is probably a little bit of a fence that I would possibly go either one. But for the video, I'm going to say sell. I think he's going to be sold eventually. Might as well do it now. Get someone in and get them used to working with Shaw while Sven Botman's out, and try to get some sort of partnership and a lot of first-team football while you can, especially someone younger. This is a perfect opportunity for Newcastle to be looking towards youth, getting someone relatively young in and growing them, especially with Sven Botman as well. Working up a fantastic partnership for many, many years to come. Then we got Paul Dummett. Used to be one of my favourite players at Newcastle. I think a very underrated player. Again, another Newcastle player who's so versatile, can play a number of positions. He is 32. His contract is up. Very similar to Matt Ritchie. I think if we had to qualify for some sort of European football, whether it was conference or otherwise, definitely worth keeping him around, just because the more matches you play, the more injuries you're likely to pick up. And that would have been something that Newcastle would have to been very conscious with, and he would have provided just a little bit of extra cover for Newcastle. However, no European football. He's only played 20 minutes this season. Now, he has probably got another season, another 2 seasons in him. He could probably drop down and play Championship football. He is Mr. Newcastle. Is he going to want to, at this stage of his career, go away and play that last couple of seasons, or will he probably just accept some sort of role within Newcastle United? You'd imagine he's seen everything in a Newcastle shirt. That kind of experience is invaluable and could definitely bring something valuable to Eddie Howe's coaching staff. Definitely worth keeping around Newcastle, but can he do it at this level? Unfortunately not. If he wants to go on and play Championship football, all the best. Go play, finish your career, but you've been a fantastic servant for Newcastle United. Okay, and next we move on to central midfield. Now, going through this, you'll see that Newcastle do have a long list of central midfielders. Now, especially the Tonali ban's finished, and a lot of players are back to full fitness. Now, what does surprise me when I do speak to fans outside St James's Park, ask them about transfers, a lot of them seem to identify central midfield as the #1 position that Newcastle should be going for. For me, I think we're well stocked up. I think the emergence of Lewis Miley, I think we've got Anderson. If you look at all the players below, I'll put the link back up so you can see that. We've got an array of amazing midfielders. I personally think it's one of the most strongest positions that Newcastle have. Like I say, especially with us not getting any sort of European football, we've probably got the central 3 that everyone would kind of say Tonali sitting deep, and then it gives Joelinton and Bruno a bit of a license to push forward a bit. You'd imagine that's going to be the #1 starting midfield for Newcastle in the majority of games. Then you've got Miley, then you've got Anderson, then you've got Willock. There's only 3 slots, and you've got 6 players going for that. You've also got Longstaff, sorry, that's 7. Yeah, 7 players that we've got. That's far too much. Now, that's going to be such a tricky job to keep 7 players happy with the game time minutes they've got when you're only playing Premier League football. Let's take a deep dive. With 7 players, one of them's got to go. Let's look into it. Okay, so let's go easy first. Bruno Guimaraes, absolutely fantastic midfield maestro. Now, with Tonali coming back, he's going to be the deep lying central midfielder. This is going to be the excuse for Bruno to go forward. Now, he's mentioned it early when he joined Newcastle interviews that he wants to be playing more attacking football. He wants to be further up the pitch. He's basically got that with Tonali. I'm going to be personally very excited to see the numbers that he'll be fetching in next season. If we look at last season, the season just gone, he played 37 matches. He played 3,263 minutes. Now, that's most in both categories for Newcastle United this season. Despite that, he's only got 7 goals and 8 assists. Now, there has been an awful lot of injuries at Newcastle this season. I know a lot of opposition fans will be sick of that, using that as an excuse because Chelsea had it, Liverpool had it, etc. Newcastle almost topping the brackets for injuries, and someone who's been a victim of that has probably been Bruno, because there's been a lot of defensive work that he's had to do to kind of cover. This season, I would expect both his goals and assist numbers to go up massively. We need to try to hold on to him. Currently, at the moment, there's a £100 million release figure. I'd be very curious to see who does go in that. Obviously, a lot of clubs cutting their cloth, and is this season going to be exactly the same? Probably £100 million, maybe them days of having that super luxury player are a thing of the past. Spending all of that budget on one player is probably been a good time for Newcastle to have that in, because I don't really think a lot of clubs are going to be having the budget to spend that on one player this season. Be very interested. If we can keep a hold of him, fantastic. I don't think he wants to go anywhere. You can see he loves life in Newcastle. The Geordies, us, myself included, absolutely love him. Be fantastic to keep him around for many years to come. Him, for me, is our #1 central midfielder when everyone's fit. Definite keep. Okay, so then we've got Joel. Now, what can we say about Joelinton? His presence has missed absolutely massive when he's injured. You can see it totally changes the way Newcastle play. We don't have that impotence. We don't have that real ferocity in midfield. He's one of the most underrated players at Newcastle United. Yeah, he's 40 million, but what he brings to Newcastle, that bite that he has in the central midfield, the aggression cannot be understated. Fantastic player. Definite keep, no-brainer. Excited to see him being pushed a little bit more forward this season with Tonali coming in. Him and Bruno, very excited to see what they can do. They're the 3 that are probably in most Newcastle United fans' starting 11 in terms of central midfield. I'm very curious to see what Newcastle fans would do with the rest of the pecking order. Now, for me, it's still Joe Willock, then it's Lewis Miley, then you probably got Anderson. So I'm going to talk about Willock first. He's absolutely fantastic. For me, I think he's more of an attacking midfielder than a central midfielder. You can see when Longstaff gets in certain positions and he has them chances, he's not as clinical really as he should be. His expected goals aren't really what the likes of Willock and others could be. So for me, I would definitely, now that we've got Tonali in that deep line midfield, definitely gives license to players like Willock as well to go forward. His attacking numbers this season should be astronomical. I think he's a fantastic option off the bench. I think he's a fantastic player. I can't rate him highly enough. That having rotation again this season is going to be fantastic. It's going to be a luxury for Newcastle that we didn't have a lot of last season. I'm very excited to see what Willock can do this season. Definite keep. Okay, then we've got Elliot Anderson, 21 years old. He's had an injury hit season this season. Very versatile as a player. He can play central midfield, plus he can play on the wing as well. That versatility, especially on the wing where we haven't got too many luxury options, is invaluable for Newcastle. He's definitely worth keeping around the squad. He might be unhappy with his game minutes because we're not in Europe this season. But at 21, cup competitions, lots of 10-minute, 15 minutes here and there. It's a good enough opportunity for him to impress and try to work his way into the team. I definitely wouldn't be looking at loaning him out this season. And I definitely wouldn't be looking at selling. Promising future for Newcastle, so he'd be a definite keep. Then we've got Lewis Miley, 18 years old, Champions League football under his belt, Premier League football under his belt. Been fantastic. I've never seen him have a bad game. You would look at him and think he's 28 years old, the way that he plays. So composed on the ball, so comfortable, absolutely rave reviews. For someone at 18 to do what he's done this season, have this breakthrough season, has been fantastic. He's probably a little bit of a victim this season of Newcastle not qualifying for Europe. Now we've got the central midfielders all fit. His game time probably going to be reduced more and more. If Newcastle did qualify for the Conference League, it would be fantastic to see him playing week in, week out. It'd be a fantastic experience. It would only go on to develop his game. Now, with a lot of options in central midfield, this is one, again, it's a little bit tough for me to answer because I would have definitely had him around Newcastle United if it was Conference. Now we haven't got the Conference. Do you have someone at 18 years old who's going to come on and play 10 minutes here and 15 minutes there? Or do you want to ship him out maybe to a championship team, maybe even to a lower Premier League team who's going to guarantee him playing week in, week out, competitive football where it really matters and aid his development? Now, I know a lot of people watching this video and a lot of football fans in general do not see the benefit of loans. They literally want people around the team, don't see the benefit. I personally see a massive importance. When you loan someone out, especially to a competitive team where they're fighting for promotion, fighting for relegation, fighting for something, they're all fighting for something. Every single game matters, the massive importance. And it also allows you to see how they can perform every single week rather than 10 minutes and 15 minutes here and there in training where you can't really pick up too much from them. So I'm going to do this together with Longstaff. Now Longstaff for me, I think he's a very underrated player. I think he does bring a lot of energy to Newcastle United. What you need to factor in with Longstaff as well is FFP. Because he's a young player and he's from Newcastle, any sort of profit that we get goes straight into the profit sheet. Now, if we sold Bruno, for example, we had to buy him, so it's not all profit. Because he's a homegrown player, that does change things a little bit. Now, again, he's very Marmite with a lot of Newcastle fans. I think more Newcastle fans are probably on the side of selling this. We did the video, like I said, with everyone's contract who was expiring next season. He is one of the players whose contract does expire next season. The answer I'm going to give, like I say, it affects Lewis Hall. So if I was to keep Sean Longstaff, it really impacts, again, Lewis Miley and how many minutes he's going to get. If we loan Lewis Miley out, it's definitely worth keeping Sean Longstaff, because then he can be there if there's an injury crisis or whenever he's called upon. So I'm not going to sit on the fence. I'm going to have to give an answer. And what I would do here is I would probably keep Miley. For me, I would probably put Miley ahead of Anderson anyway in terms of minutes and stuff like that. And I would probably have to sell Sean Longstaff. I think in order to increase the budget this summer, and considering we're well stocked up in midfield, he is someone who is probably disposable, as much as it kills us, because he is a local lad. You can see how much it means playing for the team. Plus, when Newcastle do get into Champions League or Europe next season, hopefully, fingers crossed, he would be someone that would be valuable. So you could argue that a loan is probably the right move. But in terms of the moment when Newcastle are strapped for how much they can spend, you need to try to fetch money in. He's probably, for me, someone you could probably sell and get some sort of value with him going into the last year of his contract. I'd probably expect that you could probably get around £20 million for him. And I would say that'd be probably a fair deal, and it'd be best for all sort of parties as well. But it wouldn't be a massive problem if he did stay. It would just provide a lot of options for Newcastle if there's an injury crisis, anything like that. But for me, I'm gonna put him down for sell in this one. Okay, now we move on to the wing. We'll focus on left wing first of all. So number one, Anthony Gordon, definite no-brainer. He's got to keep him. Fantastic. Build the future around him. Now, looking at his stats this season, he's our second top goal scorer this season with 11 goals. He got 10 assists as well, which is absolutely fantastic return. Now, away from Newcastle United, you'd imagine on fantasy football, if you play that, he's been a bargain this season. You'd imagine it's going to be a massive jump in his pricing. He's been a bargain on fantasy. I think the Premier League's now well aware of what Anthony Gordon can do. I mean, again, speaking of Newcastle fans, when he first signed for Newcastle, myself included, I thought we'd overpaid. We paid the British tax and stuff like that. He looks like a bargain now. He's the first name on the team sheet for Newcastle. He's fantastic. He owns that left wing position. What he can do, the lack of fear that he's got attacking anyone is fantastic. You can see we've got a hell of a player and someone that will develop into a world-class player if he's not there already. He's probably there or thereabouts. I know we've got the Newcastle bias where we're going to big up our own players. He's probably there or thereabouts, but he's definitely going to become a world-class player at this race. So definite keep. Fan favourites. He's turned Newcastle around and he goes strength to strength, and long may it continue at Newcastle. Then we move in to Harvey Barnes. Now, he's had a terrible season this season, a lot of it because of injuries. I was absolutely chuffed when we signed him. I know at the time it was either Newcastle were looking at Maddison and we were looking at Barnes. Obviously, both of them have had bad seasons due to injuries and a little bit performances. Maddison's not really dug up any trees at Tottenham this season. I still think Maddison is a better player, but we've got Barnes. We'll talk about Barnes. Fantastic. I think this season, coming back from injury, I expect big things from him. I think he's going to struggle to try to compete to take Anthony Gordon's position. Anthony Gordon doesn't really get injured a heck of a lot. He is probably going to struggle for minutes, but that just should bring on a lot of eagerness to impress any single opportunity he gets. He can play a versatile as well, so if we struggle for strikers and stuff like that, we've seen Anthony Gordon get pulled up to striker, which means Barnes will get a lot more game time than you'll probably expect playing second fiddle to Anthony Gordon. So definite keep. Very impressed with Barnes, expecting a big season. Now we move on to Miggy Almiron. Now for me, he's 30 when I looked at this. I thought he was a bit younger than this. I didn't realise he was 30 years old, so he's only probably got another 2-3 years left in him. Now, his work rate seems to cover up a lot of the cracks with him, personally. I know he's a fan favourite. His work rate is phenomenal. If everyone who played in a Newcastle shirt has his work rate, it would be fantastic. He offers a lot going forward, but personally, and this is just my choice, obviously everyone's got their opinions, let us know your thoughts. We all watch football very differently. For me, I think his work rate covers up the cracks a little bit. I remember a couple of seasons ago, I was on holiday with one of my friends, Evertonian, and he was linked, and I thought this is going to be a good time. He was due somewhere in them purple patches, and the transfer fee that was rumoured, I don't even know if it even come into a bid, but it was 25 million. I thought at the time we should definitely take that. Now, if you think of football like the stock markets, you need to really sell when their stock is high and hope it doesn't really go higher. You get caught out a little bit with that. Miguel Almiron, when he's in his purple patch, for me, that's when you want to sell someone. The transfer value that we can get now compared to last season when he was banging in goals for fun, banging in assists, are going to be two completely different valuations. But for me, if we can get 20, 25 million, I would probably look at selling. For me, that's, other than centre-back and left-back, that's probably the number one position that Newcastle need to focus on this summer. I've already seen links with Elise and a few others. I'm going to touch on who Newcastle should be fetching in the next video. Like I say, stay tuned for that one. Let us know your thoughts and comments below. But for me, Miguel Miron, he's not good enough to where Newcastle want to go. If we want to reach top 4 or if we want to reach top 6, I think that's probably one of the weakest positions once all 11 people are fit. Just looking at this season, just to pull up the stats, he's only had 3 goals and 1 assist. Now, for someone who plays right wing most games for Newcastle, that's not really a good return, especially when Newcastle play this attacking brand of football. So for me, he's not really performed this season. If we can get 20 million, 25 million, I would definitely look to cash in on him. Now, Jacob Murphy. Now, he's one who I absolutely love. I think he's fantastic. You can see how happy he is to be around Newcastle. When you see him in interviews around Newcastle, you could just see you would want to play with him. You'd want to play week in, week out with him. He's a fantastic presence, a bundle of joy, fantastic player. But with the evolution of Newcastle United, is Jacob Murphy someone that should be moved on, or is he someone whose versatility can do? Now, for me, you could probably argue both of them. He's probably not going to be around in 3-4 years' time once the evolution of Newcastle does come. However, if we're playing with a tight budget in terms of FFP this season, there's probably more important options that we need to have. Jacob Murphy's probably someone who's very happy to sit on the bench, take his opportunity when he gets it. They're invaluable then, people. It's not all about the starting 11. You need to have a squad who is happy to sit on the bench and not cause any problems. Jacob Murphy, he'd be happy sitting on the bench, playing for Newcastle. Maybe in January, maybe next summer, this will be someone who you would look to move on. But for this summer, I would have him as a keep. Have that versatility option. You can play on both wings, and it's someone that Newcastle really need just in case there's any injuries and stuff like that. Next, Yankuba Minte. Now, he's had 27 starts this season. He's had a fantastic loan spell when he's been out. He's had 10 goals and 6 assists. Now, this is really not bad for such a youngster. Will it translate to Premier League? Probably not. It's a big jump. It's going to be a big ask for him to kind of jump in and play Premier League football. I have seen on a lot of the pages that we have, Newcastle Supporters Worldwide Facebook page, have noticed a lot of people saying that he should be our number one choice. He should be ahead of Miguel Miron. I think that's very ambitious and a lot to expect for someone who really hasn't played any Premier League football. For me, again, going back to the Conference League, he's going to be someone that's a victim of us not qualifying for that. If we had qualified, he would be fantastic to be fetching in, keep him around the squad, play week in, week out with all of the Newcastle squad and really judge him on what sort of level he's at after pre-season. So for me, I would definitely loan him out this season. I think playing again week in, week out is going to be hugely beneficial to him. I'll be looking for a top-level championship club, maybe even picking up the phone to Ipswich, who could probably offer him a lot of game time this season. It'd be fantastic if we can get him in a Premier League club who's able to offer that, because that's really when you can judge just how good he is at Premier League standard. But for me, high Championship, lower Premier League, but got to be playing week in, week out. Definitely needs to be playing for this stages of his development. Okay, then we move on to forwards. Now, the number one forward for Newcastle this season, next season, every single season is, as long as he's at Newcastle, is going to be Isak. Now, just looking at his stats this season, 21 goals and 2 assists. He's been up there with Haaland in all sorts of the scoring charts this season. Absolutely rave reviews from every single fan channel that I watch, whether it's Arsenal, Chelsea, whatever. Everyone, as soon as Isak is mentioned, sing the praises. We've got a massive gem on our hands with him. If you think he's got the pace, he's got the finishing, he's got the agility, he's got so much to his game. It's not just about the goal scoring, it's not about any particular stat. He's well-rounded. He's a fantastic player. He's going to bring a lot to Newcastle. He has been a little bit injured this season, and considering we've got a backup striker of Callum Wilson, who's very, very injury prone, it is a bit of a recipe for disaster having someone who does pick up injuries and someone who picks up a lot of injuries this season. For me, it's a definite keep for Isak, but next up, we're going to look at Callum Wilson. Now, he's 32. His contract does expire next season. I'm going to sing his praises first of all. He's been fantastic for Newcastle. Newcastle can't really value what he's done just enough. He's saved winning the Championship. He's saved winning Premier League. His goals are absolutely crucial. He's in them top goal scoring charts with the likes of Alan Shearer and all of the best Newcastle strikers that there's ever been. Fantastic. But at 32, with his contract coming up, do you let him run his contract out and leave on a free, or do you put your business head on and think, right, okay, we could probably get 20 million. There's going to be a lot of Premier League clubs who need that goal scorer. We'll probably overlook a little bit is injury crisis. You'd imagine Nottingham Forest, Everton, someone like that, who need goal scorers, and we'll probably overlook that. You'd still imagine he gets a decent fee. I would probably sell him in the region of 20 to 25 if we can get some sort of bid like that in. Use that money, spend it straight away, getting some sort of young striker, some promising striker. I'll touch on that in the second video. But for me, at 32, he could be moved on. He's probably enough at Newcastle to deserve to stay and warrant that, the respect that he's got around the place. But if Newcastle are putting their ruthless business head on, he's someone really that should be moved on in this window, because we've got a lot of deadwood that we need to get rid of at Newcastle, but not a lot is going to fetch in a lot of money. Callum Wilson is going to be one of them players that still command a decent fee. So for me, he's a sell, but let us know your thoughts in the comments below. So up next, we've got Cole. Now, he's had probably an underwhelming loan experience this season. He's not really been good enough, if I'm being totally brutally honest. He's had 15 games. He's played as a striker. He's played on the left wing a couple of times. He's only got, out of them 15 games, 1 goal and 1 assist. Now, that's not really enough to convince Eddie Howe to be letting him anywhere near the first team. For me, he needs another loan out. He needs to be playing week in, week out. He needs to be playing competitive football, and he really needs to be banging them goals in. He needs to be looking at himself, doing whatever it takes, getting them goals, getting them assists, because that's the thing that's going to get him into Newcastle. Newcastle next season, the season after, is going to be a highly competitive space to get into, especially a striker position, once we've got that area really strengthened. So he's going to need to work on his game a lot. He's going to have to do a lot. For me, definite loan, but the future's definitely bright with him. He's definitely one for the future. He's definitely worth keeping around, and he's going to be fantastic at Newcastle long term. Okay, so that's pretty much the end of the keep, loan, sell video. I'm going to just look at all of the players that I've said. Now, like I said throughout the video, we're going to be using a base of about 40 to 60 million, a kind of sensible base that Newcastle have in the summer. Obviously, no one knows. It's $1 million question. How much do Newcastle have? We've just signed a massive deal with Adidas. Getting rid of Castor, we're making loads of commercial deals that are very, very lucrative, very highly valuable. So you'd imagine there is some sort of transfer budget to work around with. Going through the players, let us know your thoughts and comments below. Everyone always has a divided opinion on how much we'll be able to get for whatever player. So obviously this is not going to be right. It's going to vary differently person to person. But Dubravka, I've got £2 million here. I think there'll be some sort of club that needs the Premier League experience and will probably pay a couple of million for him, even given his age. I put £2 million for that one. Karius, he's leaving, nothing for that. Emil Kraft, I reckon we'd still probably get in the region of £5 million for him. Like I say, Premier League experience. He's a Swedish international, fantastic player, and he'll offer a lot for some sort of Premier League or Championship club as well. Then we got Target, put him down as a sell. I reckon about 7 million if I'm being conservative, maybe a little bit more. You'd imagine tons of Premier League experience. Yeah, he hasn't had a great season this season, but he'll still command a decent fee, I would imagine. Richie will leave for nothing. Lascelles, I'll say 8 to 10 million for Lascelles. Like I say, proven Premier League player. He's still got some years in him. You'd imagine he'd be very, very valuable for one of the newly promoted clubs or anyone fighting around that relegation scrap. Then we got Dummett. Dummett leaves on nothing, 0 for that. I've got Longstaff, £20 million, I reckon. It wasn't that long ago when it was £50 million being rumoured at Manchester United. Yeah, we'll be kicking ourselves at that, but at the time, the future looked very, very bright for Longstaff. He's been all right, but he's not really lifted up to them lofty ambitions. £20 million is probably a realistic fee. Someone like Leeds, someone like Sheffield United, even some of the Premier League clubs will come in. £20 million probably what you'd expect. Then we got Callum Wilson, £25 million. He's got 1 year left on his contract. That gives us a total of about £65 million, give or take, in terms of a transfer budget. If we add that on top of the 40 to 60, we've probably got £115 million to play around with in the next video. So the slots that we need to be looking at, we definitely need a keeper, if not 2. We need a left back, we need a centre back, if not 2. We also need a right winger, and we also need a striker. So let us know your thoughts on that below, and stay tuned. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe for the next video where we'll be touching on that and a lot more.